You weren't born emotionally numb. You were a child who felt everything. Too deeply, too strongly, too honestly. That sensitivity was your gift, but also your greatest vulnerability. And somewhere along the way, you learned that to feel was dangerous. Carl Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." But what happens when the thing that irritates you is your own emotion, your own rawness, your own need to feel? You learn to numb not because you were weak, but because it was safer than feeling everything all the time. Perhaps you grew up in a home where emotions were dismissed, where tears were met with irritation, where sadness was shameful and joy was too loud. So you started hiding parts of yourself, slowly but surely. Eventually you stopped showing, then you stopped expressing, and finally, you stopped feeling. This emotional numbness is not a personality trait. It's a survival strategy, one carefully constructed layer at a time. What you call not feeling anything is actually your psyche's last defense mechanism. The shutting down of the emotional body when life becomes too overwhelming to process in full color. Jung spoke often about the persona, the mask we wear to meet the expectations of the world. But the danger is when we forget it's a mask, when we confuse the numbness for who we are, when the silence inside becomes so familiar we think it's peace. It's not, it's exhaustion. Emotional numbness is not the absence of pain. It is pain held so long and so tightly that it becomes frozen. You didn't stop feeling because you wanted to. You stopped feeling because somewhere along the way, feeling became dangerous. And the body remembers. The more you repressed, the more you adapted. And the more you adapted, the more you disconnected. Disconnected from your heart, from your needs, from your truth. Until one day, joy didn't reach you anymore, and sorrow didn't move you, and the things that used to make you feel alive no longer did. Jung believed that anything repressed in the unconscious would return in another form, as symptoms, as behaviors, as fate. That's what happens when you suppress your emotional world. It doesn't vanish. It changes shape, into fatigue, into apathy, into unexplainable anxiety, into relationships that don't nourish, into habits that quietly destroy. And maybe now you don't recognize yourself anymore. Maybe you look in the mirror and see a stranger with your face, but deep inside, you still carry the child who once felt everything. That child never died. That child adapted. You see, numbness is never the root. It is the result of being overstimulated, unheard, neglected, or overwhelmed for too long. The result of trying to protect yourself in a world that didn't know how to hold your sensitivity. So you became your own container, closed off, sealed shut. But this emotional shutdown comes at a cost, because when you numb pain, you numb joy too. You can't selectively turn off feelings. You either feel everything, or you feel nothing. And in choosing numbness, you may have gained safety, but you also lost connection with others, with life, with yourself. Jung wrote, "Neurosis is always a substitute for legitimate suffering." What if your numbness is just that, a shield against a grief you were never allowed to process? What if your distance is a quiet form of mourning? The truth is, emotional numbness is reversible. But healing doesn't begin with a feeling. It begins with permission. Permission to feel again, even if it's awkward, even if it hurts, even if you're not sure you can handle it. In the next part, we'll explore how your unconscious mind continues to suppress your emotions, how your nervous system is wired for protection, and what it actually takes to feel again. Not all at once, but gradually, as an act of quiet rebellion against the numbness. Emotional numbness is not emptiness, it's containment. It is the conscious and unconscious decision to place a lid on what once overflowed. You do this not because you are cold, but because your nervous system, overwhelmed by emotional intensity, chose silence over chaos. Carl Jung taught that what we repress becomes part of the shadow, the parts of us we cannot accept, so we exile them to the unconscious. But feelings don't vanish. They don't die quietly. They wait behind the curtain of your composure, shaping your choices, your relationships, your energy. When you stop feeling, your inner world doesn't go quiet. It simply operates below awareness. You begin to live on autopilot, going through motions, meeting expectations, saying you're fine, believing it even. But deep down, a quiet war is taking place between the self you present and the self you've abandoned. One of Jung's most powerful ideas was that the unconscious communicates through symbols, dreams, and somatic expressions. So if you won't feel consciously, your body will find ways to express the unspoken. Fatigue, tension, apathy, insomnia, sudden waves of panic. These aren't just physical reactions, they are emotional residues, and often you don't even realize how numb you've become until something breaks through. A song, a memory, a loss. Suddenly, you're flooded, and it feels foreign, like being touched for the first time after years of wearing armor. That armor, once your protection, has become a prison. You may have noticed you avoid deep conversations, or that joy feels distant. You might struggle to cry, or to connect, not because you're heartless, but because your emotional bandwidth has shrunk. It's not your fault. It's how your psyche coped with overload. Jung believed that the psyche seeks wholeness, that repression creates inner fragmentation. Emotional numbness isn't just a defense, it's a fracture. And to return to feeling, you must learn to reintegrate the disowned self, the part of you that once felt too much. Think of numbness as the middle ground between trauma and awakening. It's the gray zone. You're no longer in active survival, but you're not yet fully alive. You exist, but not in color. You function, but not in fullness. And this in-between space is where most people stay, often for years, believing this is all there is. But deep emotional work, the kind Jung encouraged, is about retrieving the exiled parts. And this isn't done through force. It's done through softness, through curiosity, through noticing when your body shuts down, through tracking the small flutters of emotion that try to rise, a flicker of sadness, a whisper of joy, a faint anxiety. You must treat these signals as sacred because they are your compass back to self. Many people fear that if they allow emotions to return, they will drown in them. But what really happens is this: the more you make space for your emotions, the less control they need to exert through symptoms. Reconnecting with emotion is like waking up limbs that fell asleep. It tingles, it aches, but it means life is returning. You begin to differentiate between what is real and what is residue. You begin to notice what triggers your shutdown, what people, what environments, what narratives. And slowly, you learn that feeling is not the enemy. Feeling is the invitation. Jung wrote, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." And that's the truth most avoid. But there is another truth. Beyond that pain lies clarity, aliveness, connection, purpose. You cannot selectively numb your pain without numbing your potential. So if you feel like you're living in grayscale, know this: it is reversible. The door to feeling is still there, and you don't need to kick it open. You just need to knock, gently, consistently, with compassion. Emotional numbness does not arise out of nowhere. It is born in moments of pain, repeated enough times that the nervous system begins to adapt. And one of the earliest places this begins is in childhood. Carl Jung emphasized the power of early life in shaping the unconscious. When we are young, we absorb our environment like a sponge, not just through words, but through energy, tone, and silence. If your emotions were met with discomfort, ridicule, or neglect, your unconscious mind recorded a single message: feeling is unsafe. Maybe you cried and were told, "Stop being dramatic." Maybe you were excited and heard, "Calm down." Maybe you were sad and learned to hide it so others wouldn't be uncomfortable. And so, you adapted. You became the good child, the silent one, the achiever, the caretaker. You learned that being expressive came with consequences, while being numb brought approval. And the mind, always searching for security, chose the path that brought less pain. Jung said that our neuroses are often the result of our inner child being ignored for too long, that what did not happen in the light of consciousness will manifest as fate. So these emotional shutdowns, they don't stay in the past, they become patterns. You begin to choose emotionally unavailable partners. You stay in jobs that don't fulfill. You surround yourself with people who reflect your own numbness. Because what is familiar, even if painful, feels safe. To heal, we must understand numbness is not the absence of emotion. It is the absence of emotional permission. You were not given the tools to process your internal world, so you buried it. You put your feelings in a box labeled "too much" and placed it on the highest shelf. But that box still hums. It still vibrates with all the things you never got to say, feel, or cry out. When you start to heal, the first step is not to force emotion. It is to create safety. Emotional reconnection cannot happen in an environment that still feels dangerous. That danger doesn't have to be physical. It can be energetic, internal, the fear of being judged, the fear of losing control, the fear that if you let it all out, it will never stop. That's why Jung believed so strongly in shadow work, because until you make the unconscious conscious, it controls your life. The shadow is not just rage, jealousy, or shame. It is also your softness, your grief, your longing, your desire to be loved without earning it. To begin feeling again, you must gently lower the armor. You must replace self-judgment with curiosity. Instead of asking, "Why am I like this?" ask, "What happened that made this feel necessary?" That question alone can begin to shift your energy. Neuroscience shows us that the brain can rewire. The emotional brain, the limbic system, responds to new experiences. If your body has only known dismissal, it needs to experience acceptance. If your inner child only knew punishment, it needs to meet compassion. This is where practices like somatic healing, mindfulness, inner child work, and Jungian journaling become powerful. They bypass logic. They bring awareness to sensation. They help you sit with an emotion for 5 seconds longer than you used to. That's all it takes at first. 5 seconds of presence. 5 seconds of feeling before shutting down. In time, that window widens. The fear of emotion begins to loosen. You begin to realize that you are not broken. You are layered. That numbness is not a flaw, it's a wound. And wounds can heal, but only when they are seen. Reconnection is not a lightning strike. It is a quiet return, a remembering, a relearning of your emotional language. And like learning any language, you will make mistakes. You'll feel too much. You'll shut down again. That's okay. Healing is not linear. It spirals. Carl Jung once said, "We cannot change anything until we accept it." Condemnation does not liberate, it oppresses. This is your work, not to fix yourself, but to welcome yourself back. All of you, even the frozen parts. Once you begin to feel again, even just a little, you realize something profound. Your emotions were never the enemy. What caused pain was the resistance, the hiding, the suppression. And now that you've started to reconnect, the question becomes, how do you stay connected in a world that so often demands you shut down? Carl Jung believed that healing was not about becoming perfect. It was about becoming whole. And wholeness includes the parts of you that still tremble, the parts that cry too easily, the parts that feel too much. They are not problems. They are signals that you're alive again. Staying open emotionally is not about always being raw or vulnerable. It's about being real. It's about giving yourself permission to feel without judgment. To say, I am sad, without needing a reason. To say, I am overwhelmed, without apologizing. Emotional maturity is not about control. It's about intimacy with your own inner world. But make no mistake, the world will test your openness. You will be tempted to numb again, in the name of productivity, peace, or safety. You'll meet people who dismiss your feelings. You'll encounter days where shutting down seems easier than sitting with what's real. That's why grounding practices are essential. Jung spoke of the self as the organizing principle of the psyche, the inner center that gives coherence to our being. When you ground into yourself, you anchor your emotions within a larger awareness. You realize this sadness is here, but it is not all of me. This fear is loud, but I am bigger than it. Practices like breathwork, embodiment, nature walks, creative expression, and solitude help you return to that center. They remind you that emotions are energy in motion, not facts, not identity, not punishment. Just waves. And you can ride them. Another key element in staying open is boundaries. Many emotionally numb people fear boundaries because they confuse them with coldness. But boundaries are not walls. They are clarity. They are how you protect your softness, not eliminate it. Jung's idea of individuation, the process of becoming your truest self, includes learning where you end and others begin. When you honor your limits, you create space to feel safely. You don't absorb every emotion around you. You don't collapse under pressure. You feel and you choose. That is emotional power. You also need community, but the right kind. People who value depth over performance. People who are not afraid of silence, tears, or joy. Being around those who live with emotional honesty gives you permission to do the same. It creates resonance, a shared field where your sensitivity is not a flaw, but a contribution. And finally, perhaps most importantly, you must forgive the version of yourself who went numb. They were doing the best they could. They didn't have the tools, the awareness, the support. They believed that shutting down was the only way to survive. And in many ways, they were right. You are here today because of their strength. But now, you have more. You have insight. You have choice. You have the wisdom of everything you've endured. Jung wrote, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." That's the heart of emotional healing, not erasing the past, but integrating it. Not pretending you never went numb, but understanding why, and choosing again and again to return to yourself. So, what does life feel like when you reclaim your emotions? It feels like color returning to a grayscale world, like music after silence, like breath after holding it for too long. It doesn't mean you'll never hurt again. In fact, you may feel pain more deeply, but you'll also feel joy more fully. You'll laugh without holding back. You'll cry without shame. You'll connect without fear. Because feeling is the essence of being human. To feel is to live awake. To feel is to participate in your own existence. To feel is to honor your soul's language, the one it's been speaking since the beginning. So, if you've become emotionally numb, know this. It was never the end of the story. It was the pause before the return, the silence before the music. And now, it's your turn to listen.